The story begins on a rainy evening in Los Angeles. Streets were crowded with people running for cover, umbrellas fighting against the heavy wind. Inside a small family restaurant near Hollywood Boulevard, a young woman sat quietly in the corner booth. Her name was Alina. Her clothes were worn, her hair damp from the rain, and her hands trembled as she held a menu that felt heavier than it should. She had not eaten a proper meal in 2 days, and she could barely afford what was in front of her. She kept glancing at the door, hoping no one would notice how nervous she was. The waitress came by with a kind smile, but Alina forced one back. Embarrassed to admit she might not have enough money, she thought of her struggles working to jobs that barely covered her rent, trying to send money to her younger brother back home, and living with the constant weight of feeling invisible in a city where dreams often died in silence. Then the door opened. Rain blew in for a moment, and a man walked inside. His presence was calm, almost humble. He wore simple clothes, nothing flashy, and he quietly looked around before choosing a seat not far from her. Alina recognized him instantly. It was Keanu Reeves. Not the Hollywood star on a red carpet, not the action hero from the big screen, but a man sitting alone, ordering a cup of coffee like everyone else. Her heart raced. She had seen him in movies all her life, but she had also read stories about his kindness, about how he treated people with respect no matter who they were. Still, she never imagined she would see him here, in this small restaurant, on a rainy night when she herself felt like she was at the lowest point of her life. The waitress returned to Elena's table. Elena quietly ordered the cheapest soup on the menu and a small piece of bread. When the waitress left, she lowered her eyes, ashamed. She knew it would barely fill her, but it was all she could pay for. She prayed she had enough cash in her wallet. As she waited, she overheard laughter from another table. 2 men were mocking her, whispering about her clothes, her tired face, and how she looked like she didn't belong. Their voices were low, but cruel words have a way of reaching the heart no matter how quietly they're spoken. Lena felt her throat tighten. What she didn't realize was that Keanu had noticed everything. He had seen her nervous glance at the menu. He had heard the whispers that cut through her spirit. And when the waitress returned, he quietly asked for her bill. He didn't make a scene. He didn't walk over to her and announce his gesture. He simply placed extra cash on the counter and nodded at the waitress to keep it between them. Eyes carried the kind of understanding that needed no words. When Alina finished her soup, she reached for her wallet. Her heart sank as she counted the coins. Before panic could spread through her chest, the waitress leaned closer and whispered, "Your bill has already been taken care of." Alina froze. What? By who? The waitress smiled and nodded toward the corner. Alina turned her head. Keanu was still there, sipping his coffee calmly, as if nothing had happened. Their eyes met for a moment. There was no pride in his look, no expectation, only quiet kindness. Tears filled Elena's eyes. She wanted to say thank you, but her voice caught in her throat. In that small act, something inside her shifted. For days she had felt invisible, but at that moment, someone had seen her. Not just anyone, but a man the world admired for his movies, yet who proved in silence that his heart was bigger than his fame, and so began a story that would change her life. A story not about money, not about celebrity, but about kindness in its purest form, kindness that grows into something greater than anyone expects. This was the night Alina would never forget. Alina sat frozen in her seat, her hands gripping the edge of the table. The warmth of the soup lingered in her stomach, but it was nothing compared to the warmth rising in her chest. Someone had seen her struggle. Someone had chosen to help without asking for anything in return. She wanted to thank him, but fear and shyness held her back. After all, he was Keanu Reeves. How could she, a struggling waitress and part-time student, even begin a conversation with a man like him? But kindness has a way of breaking down walls. As Alina slowly gathered her things, she noticed the 2 men at the other table, still whispering. One of them snickered, pointing toward her worn shoes. She lowered her head, cheeks burning. Before she could escape the moment, she heard a chair slide back. Keanu stood up. He walked calmly past their table, not stopping, not confronting them. directly, yet the quiet firmness in his stride made the men fall silent. Sometimes dignity does not need loud words. It only needs presence. Keanu headed toward the door, pausing to pull on his jacket. The rain outside had softened, leaving a gentle mist on the windows. Alina finally found her courage. She grabbed her small bag, hurried across the floor, and called softly, "Sir, excuse me." He turned, his face calm and open, with the same humility she had seen when he entered. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You didn't have to do that." Keanu smiled faintly. "Sometimes we do things not because we have to, but because it's right." His voice was gentle, carrying no weight of superiority, only truth. Alina swallowed hard. "People don't usually notice me. I can't remember the last time someone was this kind." He studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod. "You deserve to be noticed. Everyone does." Those words struck deeper than she expected. She felt tears press against her eyes again, but she held them back. Before she could respond, he gave a simple wave and stepped into the rain. Alina watched him go, her heart racing. It would have been easy to believe this was the end of it, a fleeting kindness from a stranger she admired. But life has a strange way of weaving threads together when we least expect it. The following week, Alina returned to her usual routine. She worked long hours at a small diner on the edge of the city, saving whatever little she could for rent and her brother's school fees. The nights were heavy, filled with exhaustion, but inside her, something had shifted. She replayed Keanu's words over and over. "You deserve to be noticed." One late evening, while wiping down tables after closing, her manager called out from the back, "Lena, someone's asking for you." Confused, she walked to the front. Standing by the door was a man in a simple black hoodie. For a moment she didn't recognize him. Then he lowered the hood and her breath caught. It was Keanu. "Hi," he said softly, almost shyly. "Sorry to bother you at work." Alina froze. "You here?" I shrugged lightly. "I was nearby, thought I'd stop in for a coffee." Then he added, "And maybe to ask how you're doing?" Her heart swelled. No one ever asked her that. Not really. She poured him a coffee with trembling hands and sat across from him once the last customers left. They talked quietly about small things, at first books, music, the city. But soon the conversation grew deeper. Keanu listened more. Then he spoke, asking gentle questions about her life, her family, her dreams. For the first time in years, Alina felt her voice mattered. She told him about her brother, about her dream of finishing school, about the nights she went to bed hungry, but refused to give up. He didn't pity her. Instead, he looked at her with respect, as if her resilience was something rare and powerful. When the clock neared midnight, he finally stood. "You're strong," he said quietly. "Don't let the world convince you otherwise." She nodded. Though her eyes brimmed with tears, he left as quietly as he had come, but the silence he left behind was filled with new hope. Yet, as comforting as that night was, Alina could not predict what would come next. Life had more trials prepared for her, tests that would push her beyond her limits. And Keanu's role in her journey was only just beginning. The days after Keanu's visit felt different for Alina. She still woke up early, still hurried through buses and long shifts, but there was a spark inside her now, something she hadn't felt in years' hope. One man's kindness, one man's time had reminded her that she mattered. But life never moves in a straight line. Just when things feel lighter, storms often return. One evening, Elena's phone rang while she was cleaning tables at the diner. She almost ignored it, thinking it was a spam call, but when she answered, her younger brother's voice came through, shaky and weak. "Elena, I think I'm sick." Her chest tightened. Her brother lived miles away in a small town where medical help was limited. He had always been fragile, and their parents had passed years ago, leaving Alina as his only support. "What's wrong?" she asked quickly. I can't breathe well," he whispered. Panic shot through her. She promised to call an ambulance and hung up, hands trembling as she did. Tears blurred her eyes. She had no savings for hospital bills. She barely managed. Her rent, how could she help him now? That night, after rushing home, She sat on her bed with her head buried in her hands. Her brother was admitted to a hospital, but the doctors said he needed treatment they could not afford. The weight was unbearable. She felt powerless, like the world was closing in on her. Then, her phone buzzed again. It was a text from an unknown number. "This is Keanu. You left your phone number on the receipt the other night? Are you okay?" Lena wiped her tears, stunned. She had scribbled her number without even realizing, almost as a silent thank you she never expected him to use. Now, reading his message, she hesitated. Should she tell him the truth? Would it be a burden? Finally, she replied, "My brother is sick. I don't know what to do." Minutes later, her phone rang. His voice came through, calm but concerned. "Tell me everything," and she did. Every detail, every fear. She expected him to sound distant, maybe offer kind words and leave it at that. But instead, after a long pause, he said, "I'll help." Her breath caught. "No, you've already done so much. I can't let you. This isn't about letting," he said firmly but gently. "It's about doing what's right. Family is everything." 2 days later, Elena's brother was transferred to a better hospital. The bills, which would have crushed her for years, were covered quietly. Keanu never spoke of it, never wanted recognition, only asked for updates on her brother's health. But kindness, even pure, doesn't come without consequences. Rumors began to spread. At the diner, co-workers whispered about Elena's special guest. One night, she overheard 2 women laughing, saying she was chasing a rich man to solve her problems. It cut deeply, but she stayed silent. The cruelest blow came when her manager called her into the office. "We can't have distractions here," he said coldly. "People say you're using customers to get favors. It's bad for the diners." Elena's mouth fell open. "That's not true. He's just a friend." But her defense didn't matter. She was fired that night without warning. She walked home under the dim streetlights, tears streaming down her face. The weight of losing her only steady income crushed her spirit. For a moment, she wished she had never met Keanu. It's not because of him, but because of what people's jealousy and assumptions had stolen from her. When she reached her small apartment, her phone buzzed again. Another message from him. "Can I come by tomorrow? I want to talk." She almost said no. She almost shut the world out. But deep inside, she knew she needed someone who believed in her. The next day, when he arrived, she broke down in tears. "People think I'm using you," she cried. "I lost my job. Feel like everything is slipping away." Keanu listened quietly, his expression soft. Then he said words that pierced through her despair. "The truth doesn't need defending. Let them talk. You know who you are, and I know who you are." For the first time, she saw not just kindness in his eyes, but strength. He wasn't only helping her survive, he was teaching her to stand tall, no matter how the world tried to bend her. But neither of them knew that this was only the beginning of the storm. The media would soon find out about their quiet connection. And when that happened, the kindness of one man would be tested against the harsh judgment of the world. The morning after Keanu's visit, Lena woke to the sound of her phone buzzing nonstop. First, she thought it was her brother sending updates from the hospital. But when she unlocked the screen, her heart dropped. There were dozens of notifications, messages from coworkers, old friends, even strangers. Someone had taken a photo of her and Keanu sitting together at the diner that night. The picture had spread across social media, with headlines suggesting that Keanu Reeves has a new mystery woman. Elena's stomach twisted. She wasn't prepared for this. Her private struggle, her quiet gratitude, was suddenly being picked apart by thousands of strangers who didn't even know her name. The comments were cruel. Some mocked her appearance, calling her too plain or too ordinary for someone like him. Others accused her of chasing his money, saying she was nothing more than a gold digger who got lucky. She read the words with shaking hands, each insult cutting deeper than the last. When Keanu called later that day, his voice was calm but serious. "I saw the news. Don't read the comments. They don't know you." But she couldn't stop. It was like watching her own dignity shatter in real time. "Keanu, they're tearing me apart," she whispered. "They think I'm using you." Paused for a long moment before answering. Let them think what they want. Truth survives longer than gossip. Still, Alina couldn't shake the fear. Her brother was recovering in the hospital, but she worried what he might see online. She worried about rent, about being jobless, about being branded with a reputation she never asked for. Days later, things grew worse. Reporters began showing up outside her small apartment. Neighbors stared whenever she left, whispering as she passed. Once, while buying groceries, a woman sneered at her, saying, "Must be nice to have a millionaire pay your bills." Alina left the store without buying anything, humiliated. The breaking point came when a journalist followed her to the hospital. Cameras flashed as she entered her brother's room, and she broke down crying, begging them to leave. It felt like her life was no longer her own. That night, when Keanu visited quietly through the back entrance, she finally collapsed into his arms. "Why me?" she sobbed. "Why did you help me? My life was hard before, but now it feels impossible." It held her shoulders, steady and firm, because kindness matters, and because you matter. "But if this is too much, I'll step back. I don't want to bring more pain into your life." She looked up at him, eyes wet with tears. "No, please don't. You're the only person who's ever really seen me. I just don't know how to be strong when the whole world is against me." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his voice low but certain. "Then let them be against you. I'll stand with you." Those words settled deep in her chest. For the first time in days, she felt a spark of courage. Yet, even as their bond grew stronger, the pressure from the outside world only intensified. News outlets began digging into her past, twisting her struggles into scandal. Old acquaintances reached out, pretending to care, but secretly hoping for gossip. The cruelty was endless. Still, Alina refused to let go of one thing, the kindness that had started it all. She remembered the rainy night, the soup, the quiet gesture that had changed her life. If Keanu could show her that much compassion, maybe she could learn to face the world with the same strength. But the storm wasn't done. A new headline appeared the next week. Keanu Reeves' mystery woman's past revealed. What the article contained would shake Alina to her core and threaten everything she was trying to rebuild. The article spread faster than Alina could have imagined. On the front page of entertainment websites, her face was everywhere. But it wasn't only her photo, it was her past. The headlines screamed with cruel exaggeration, "Mystery Woman." Hiding dark history and Keanu Reeves' companion once accused of theft. Alina's heart nearly stopped when she read the words. Years ago, when she was 18, she had worked in a clothing store. One evening, after her shift, her coworker framed her for stealing cash from the register. Though the charges had been dropped when the truth came out, the shame had left a scar that never truly healed. She had tried to bury it, to start over, to live quietly. But now the world was dragging it back into the light. Social media exploded with judgment. Strangers called her a criminal, a liar, a fraud. Her phone buzzed with endless messages, some threatening, some mocking. The cruelest voices said she had trapped Keanu with her sob story, that she was using her past to gain pity. Alina stayed in her apartment, blinds closed, too afraid to even step outside. Her brother called from the hospital, his voice trembling. "Alina, don't listen to them. I know who you are." But even his comfort couldn't quiet the storm in her chest. She felt exposed, humiliated, and broken all over again. 2 days later, Keanu showed up at her door. When she opened it, her face was pale from sleepless nights. "I can't do this," she whispered. "The world hates me. Should have stayed invisible." Stepped inside, closing the door softly behind him. "Alina, listen to me. I know about your past. I know what happened. I also know it wasn't your fault." Tears spilled from her eyes. "Not now. It looks like I'm a liar. Everyone believes I'm not good enough. I'll only ruin your name." He shook his head firmly. "You can't ruin me. And you don't need to be perfect to deserve kindness. Your past doesn't define you, your choices today do." His words wrapped around her like a shield, but fear still gnawed at her heart. But the world. They don't care about truth. They just want a story. When Keanu's eyes softened, but there was a strength in them too. Then we'll show them another story. It's the real one. A week later, against all odds, he brought her with him to a public charity event. Cameras flashed as they stepped out together, and whispers rose immediately. People expected him to walk ahead, to ignore her once the crowd grew harsh. But instead, he held her hand steady and sure, never letting go. When reporters shouted questions about her past, Keanu answered calmly. Everyone has a history. What matters is who they are now. Alina is strong, she's kind, and she's not defined by lies. The moment stunned the crowd. For once, the noise of judgment began to quiet. That night, as they returned home, Alina looked at him with disbelief. Why would you stand by me like that? You could have walked away. No one would have blamed you. His reply was simple, but carried weight she would never forget. Because when the world tears someone down, that's when they need someone to stay. Her heart ached with gratitude, but also with fear. She knew the media storm wasn't over. People don't forgive easily, and cruel stories have long shadows. But she also knew something else: she was no longer facing it alone. Yet even as she found strength in his loyalty, a new challenge was forming. One of her old co-workers, the very one who had framed her years ago, saw the news and decided to speak out. And this time, the lies he spread would threaten not just her dignity, but also Keanu's name. The lies came suddenly, sharper than before. Her old co-worker, the same one who had framed her years ago, gave an interview to the media. With a smug smile, he claimed Alina had been trouble from the start, that she used pity to get out of consequences, and that she was now doing the same thing with Keanu. The words spread quickly, feeding the public's hunger for drama. Headlines twisted his lies into fire, painting Alina as a manipulator who had fooled even one of Hollywood's most beloved stars. Alina felt her chest tighten when she saw the broadcast. It was like living her nightmare twice: once when she was young and powerless, and now again under the cruel spotlight of the world. She broke down, her hands shaking as she told Keanu, "This will never stop. No matter what we do, people will never believe me." Keanu sat beside her, his presence calm, his voice steady.
No.
"Then we'll fight back with truth. But this time, you won't face it alone." The next day, something unexpected happened. A woman reached out, an old employee from the same store where Alina had once worked. She had seen the news and couldn't stay silent anymore. She confirmed the truth. Alina had been innocent, and it was the co-worker who had stolen the money. Back then, fear of losing her own job had kept her quiet. But now, she wanted to make things right. With her testimony, the story shifted. News outlets began reporting the other side. Some apologized for rushing to judgment. Others simply moved on to the next scandal. But for Alina, it was more than enough. The truth was finally out. When the media asked for a statement, Keanu stood before the cameras once more. "This is why kindness matters," he said. "Because the world is quick to judge, but slow to understand. Alina is not her past. None of us are. What defines us is how we rise when the world tries to break us." The silence that followed was heavy, and for the first time since the storm began, Alina felt the world's eyes not as knives, but as open doors. In the weeks that followed, things began to calm. The reporters left her street, the cruel messages slowed, and her brother recovered. Fully. Life wasn't suddenly perfect, but it was real again, and for Alina, that was enough. One evening, as the sun set over the city, she and Keanu walked quietly through a park. The air was soft, and the world felt strangely at peace. "You changed everything," she whispered. He shook his head. "No, you did. I just reminded you of what you already had inside." She smiled, tears warming her eyes, but these were not the tears of pain she had once cried. They were tears of strength, of gratitude, of hope. The kindness of a stranger had become the courage of a friend. That friendship had grown into something neither of them had expected, something deeper, stronger, unshaken by storms. For Alina, the lesson was clear. Kindness is never small. It has the power to lift someone when they're drowning, to light a path when the world is dark, to remind a soul that they are not invisible. And for Keanu, it was another reminder of the truth he had always lived by, that greatness is not in fame or wealth, but in the quiet ways we choose to care for others.